I want you to understand that your skill set shouldn't be greedy. Like your menu of services, what you offer, what you do. You should prioritize your schedule to meet your goal of that minimum number, and 70% of the time.
Welcome back to the Millennial Dentist Podcast, a podcast all about working smarter, not harder. Pushing dentists to go beyond dental school dentistry and build the practice of your dreams. Here is your host, the Millennial Dentist himself, Dr. Sully Sullivan.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Millennial Dentist Podcast. Exciting episode today. So what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about really two things, I guess. One is how do we balance out our schedule to maintain a level of production that doesn't just become so roller coaster where it's 1 month up, 1 month down, 1 month up, 1 month down. And then what does it mean to set minimums and maximums within our schedule when it comes to setting goals and setting production? So check it out. Okay, so the question becomes well, first and foremost, like this challenge has arisen for a lot of doctors that I've talked with recently because we're moving into a little bit of economic uncertainty as it relates to our practices. I don't know if you're seeing this, but I'm definitely seeing it in my own practice and across the board. It just seems like people aren't quite as willing to spend money. Elective dentistry's down a little bit. And as it pertains to like what I've seen in the past year or two, where it's been kind of more in constant growth, we've been able to grow. We're starting to hit a level of the supply and the demand is meeting, or my supply of dentists in my office is outliving or out maintaining the demand of what the dentistry out there is to be. So that becomes a challenge when you're looking at, okay, well, how do I budget my life, my practice, my expenses? How do I control these things? And so what I kind of want to break down in this episode is why I think that setting some level of minimal production to maintain on a month-to-month basis and then even a maximum production on a month-to-month basis is important as it pertains to goal setting. So what I've never liked about goal setting is it kind of gave you like a one target to hit for, but it's not very strategic. So if you say like, I want to do $80,000 a month. Well, we end up trying to set our schedule to where we hit 100% of our schedule is booked to meet our $80,000 goal. And naturally what happens is we probably land around that goal plus or minus $5,000, something like that. The downside of this is what it doesn't allow is for growth in your skill set and your leadership and your business. And I'll kind of look at this in two sides of the coin. One is as an associate and one is as an owner dentist. Because both people, the associate and the owner, need time away from the chair. Like your growth in your career doesn't happen unless you've got time to grow those other areas. Remember, we should do another episode on like the 4 things that I think help grow a dentist in their career, associate or owner. It's case acceptance leadership. That's kind of one. We'll just put that under leadership or soft skills. It's clinical skill set. It's technology implementation and brand building. So soft skills, clinical education, technology implementation, and brand building. And if you think about it, most dentists, associate and or owner, allocate the majority of their day in and day out business in that one bucket of clinical success or clinical growth. What they don't do is spread that out across the buckets, and I think that really, really limits dentists in their growth. They will be pretty strong clinically, but their production will maintain the same level. And so what I see is dentist after dentist after dentist who is underperforming relative to their clinical skill set on a monthly basis because they haven't invested in the other 3 buckets. So what the heck does that have to do with scheduling and minimums and maximums of production? Well, it has to do everything because it has to do with how you allocate your time. So what I want to see is that we never go below, and I'm not talking about like when you're getting established, because when you're getting established, like you got to reach the minimum on a consistent basis. But to me, the minimum is like, what do I need to live off of for my personal expenses to be lived from my associate income? Whether you're an owner or you're an associate, what that looks like is if I were to pay myself, let's just call it 30% of my adjusted production, what number do I need to hit to not live ramen noodles life, but not to live like an extravagant life, but to live like a very basic, cover the bills, I'm happy, etc. That's what I want my minimum number to be. Because if I go below that minimum number and I start to feel pressure on the personal side of things, and I felt this in my own life, your risk tolerance changes and your willingness to implement and go through the hard work and potentially see dips or experience change in your practice is significantly diminished. So as someone who helps coach other dentists and wants to see other dentists succeed, I always want to hedge my bet that we have a minimum number that we maintain so we never get into that zone of making payroll or feeling like I can't afford things. And so I really think you've got to establish to where you can, one, it's twofold, I guess. One is that you can live off personally your expenses as an associate, your income as an associate, and two, that your business can pay yourself as an associate. This is an important episode. You've got to be able to afford yourself. You've got to be able to afford yourself. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is I need to be able to, and this is where it gets tricky with the accounting and what accountants do, and they kind of jack this up a little bit for us, is that I need to be able to allocate and account for myself getting paid my percentage of adjusted production as a dentist. Somewhere around the 30% number. So if I do $100,000 that month, I should get paid $30,000. Now, what that could look like is you get paid $10,000 as W-2, $20,000 as distributions. It could also look like you get paid $20,000 in cash, but you run $10,000 worth of personal or other business expenses, in quotes, through the practice. But they all net up to that $30,000 number. I need to make sure that I'm allocating and getting paid for what I do. If you're not doing that, we've got to establish what we need to do either to increase production or decrease expenses to get to where we run the business in a way that gets you paid what you get paid. You have no business bringing in an associate if you can't even pay yourself as an associate. That means your systems aren't defined and refined enough that will only put more pressure on you. I see it time and time again. So you have to be able to allocate that. Now, the second thing is you then need to be able to live off that. And so if you're struggling to live off of your associate income, and you're needing to use the business income, that percentage that you make as an owner, for the owners, to help live your personal life, I would tell you that you need to increase your production. Now, again, before you go out and associate, before you do a lot of more investments of things, you need to grow your personal production, which probably looks like adding CE, working on your communication skills, your technology, your brand, all those different things to help grow to get to the point where you can hit a higher level of production so that your personal expenses can fund from your associate income. So that's a really important part. Now, again, let's tie this back into how this affects the scheduling. Well, I want you to be able to meet your minimum production in basically 70% of the time that you normally would do clinical dentistry. So if normally you work 4 days a week and you do dentistry 4 days a week, I want you to clinically be able to make it to where you can do that. So recapping this so far, because I think that's important. We're seeing economic challenges that are causing us to, I think, see more personal expense problems and then potential business expense problems due to there not just being an overwhelm of demand for what we do. What that in turn causes you to do is it puts more pressure and we see up and down months, and we're trying to even that out so that we have some level of stability and growth and we can be strategic in our growth. So to do that, we need to set a minimum and maximum number, which I haven't totally gone into why we need to do that yet. But in order to do that, I need to be able to live off my associate income, which means I need to be able to pay myself as an associate in the full number that I get. How that's allocated by accounting is somewhat of your own personal deal, but I need to make sure that I can afford to pay myself what I would get paid if I was an associate. And then I need to be able to live off those expenses, live off that income. And if I can't live off that income personally, I either need to lower my expenses, stop spending so much money, or learn to produce more so that I can continue to live off of my associate income and not have to rob from the business. Because when I start robbing from the business, that really starts to lower your risk levels and not allow you to make the big jumps or make the decisions that allow you to make the big jumps and where you can really grow your practice or your career. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to set up our schedules where we meet our minimum number, a healthy number, not like your bare minimum, but a nice healthy minimum within 70% of the work, 70% of the days that I work. Now, with that, I want you to understand that your skill set shouldn't be greedy, like your menu of services, what you offer, what you do. You should prioritize your schedule to meet your goal of that minimum number in 70% of the time. And then what we should be doing is we should be willing to do more of the services that we're willing to do. What I'm seeing now is people are too quick to be like, oh, I just want to do implants, or I don't want to do fillings, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. And we need to be doing what it takes to meet that minimum number, because that's where we start to be able to feel that breath of, okay, now I have the room to start to make the decisions I want to make. Now, I want you to think of it like they're like rails, like bumpers when you're bowling. And then the goal is not to just stay right next to one bumper. It's to stay kind of in the middle or have an upside of moving to the other side of the bumper where that's your maximum. What I want you to think of mentally is that to get to the minimum number of production, let's say your 80 grand is your goal, 70 grand is your minimum, or 65 is your minimum. Till you get to 65, I want you to be doing what it takes to get there. Meaning be willing to do the procedures, not just be greedy about the procedures. Once you get to that number, now we have 30% of the time left. Now this is where I want you to start to be way more selective. Now all of a sudden we start to shoot for high upside because we're trying to get not to land at 90, but now we want to land at 90 or 100. Now at some point, I think there should be a maximum number, because what can happen, and I've seen this happen, is you hit your minimum number in 70% of the time. But now there's a bunch of good stuff clinically that comes your way that allows you to go throw up like 110, 120. That is great, but it's not a good long-term mindset. It's a short-term mindset because, and hear me out, you may not always have that excess of just great stuff coming in. And if you end up with your schedule clinically booked 100% to capacity, then how do you ever have time to actually grow those other three parts of your career? The soft skills, the technology implementation, and the brand building. Like, you can't be booked clinically all the time because otherwise those things suffer. And so then it just becomes like a hamster wheel of busyness. Now that busyness, like I saw this happen with my buddy Adam, and that he was busy doing restorative dentistry and single implants. Then he learned to do full arch. And then he got just busy doing full arch, which is great. Don't get me wrong. The income goes up, but you're still on the same hamster wheel that ultimately kind of shunts your growth. And clinical, by the way, clinical growth really only necessarily grows top line production. It doesn't necessarily grow bottom line profitability for your business. Let me say that again. Clinical growth helps grow top line revenue. It doesn't necessarily fix bottom line numbers. I would argue that leadership, your soft skills, how you implement technology to vertically integrate to decrease costs, increase profitability, and how you leverage your brand, building your brand to decrease marketing expenses because people want to come to you, making you and defining yourself as the expert. The other three buckets have a larger impact on what you take home than probably the clinical growth side of things. Just some serious food for thought there to think about, especially for you business owners. So again, if we set up our schedule to where I've got, hey, we don't let Sully's schedule go below 65,000. Like, we've got to get him there. We've got to get him there. That allows me to feel comfortable and be tolerant with what I'm doing. I need to be able to live off $65,000, but that keeps me happy. Then, with that other amount of time, I want to essentially move my skill set to basically only hit big hitters. So I'm willing to hit singles, doubles, triples to get to the first number, the 65 number. But after that, I want to move my skill set or my menu of services I'm willing to do that month to now triples or home runs. So that I've got big upside, less time. And then at some point when I hit that maximum number, let's say I get 2 big cases. So now I go from 65 to 100. Now I want to move even more extreme, where it's no longer I'm offering triples, it's only home runs. Because at this point, now I got to start to think about how can I allocate my time outside of doing clinical dentistry to do these other things so that I can grow my business in a long-term standpoint and not just get short-term growth with clinical associate money. And I say associate money because that's really where that comes from, is it's coming from as an associate, whether I'm the owner associate or the normal associate, my production and my income comes from the month in and month out production. The downside is I haven't built any necessarily passive type income that comes from growing a business. Now, associates, you can do this different ways. I'm not saying that you need to be an owner. Like, that's only one way. That also means that it's just how you invest your money. Some people as associates choose to invest their money in becoming an owner. Some people choose to invest their money in getting into real estate, getting into index funds, wherever you need to do it. At some point, our goal has to be personally, how do I use my income as an associate being you're an owner, as an associate, that income you get, to then grow a level of passive income so I'm not having to month in, month out, hit my number to live off of. This probably making some of your head spin, because it just is a lot to take in, but it really is important concepts. Because when I'm just focusing on being a dentist, owner or associate, and I'm focused on the clinical dentistry of it, I'm on a hamster wheel that must run month in, month out. That to me is exhausting and a little bit depressing to think about that I got to do that for the next 35 to 40 years of hard, backbreaking work, dealing with patients, dealing with team members. So at some point, I've got to grow that income to where I can leverage that income to do one of two things. Or not one of two things, it's just one thing. To take some of that money and invest it into something else so that at some point I'm getting paid in some way other than just what I do with my hands. That could be owning a dentist practice, could be owning a car wash, could be owning index, whatever that looks like. That is really, on some level, where this all kind of got to. That's not necessarily where I thought this episode was going to go, but that is the ultimate point, right? And the beauty is the closer that I get to that opportunity, the more financial flexibility I'm built and more risk I can take in just doing more of the dentistry that I want to do, helping people in the community, doing more free dental days. It gives me so much more autonomy to do things. So let me give you a take home just to kind of wrap a bow on this episode. I think my take home is 2 points. One is that I want you to really take a hard look to see, can you live off of your associate income? And can you pay yourself as an associate? What that means is that either as an owner or as an associate, hopefully as an associate, you're getting paid. Are you getting your 30% or whatever that number is of your adjusted production or collections? Can you live off that number? That's take home point number one. Take home point number two is, how can I leverage my schedule and set my schedule up in a way to make sure that I get to that minimum number that I need before I start getting too risky or feeding my associates too much or working on the business too much. Because you may be willing for a month or two to hedge that and have a low month, but at some point, the personal expenses and the business expenses are going to catch up and you're going to be like, this isn't working out. And so I don't like you sandbagging for very long. I want you to get to your minimum number. At that point, the take home is once you're consistently hitting that minimum number, let's move our schedule to be more of a triple base hits or home run hits, like big opportunity case dentistry. Maybe this, I'm not saying this is hybrids or 10 units or full mouth rehabs. Maybe this is just chunks of $4,000 or $5,000 worth of dentistry in one patient. And then with the other time, let's work on those three other buckets of soft skills, technology implementation, and brand building. If you will do that, you will start to grow a much better dental business. And that is either as an associate, as an entrepreneur, or as a owner in growing the whole practice of the business. Both parties have got to spend more time on those three other buckets of career growth. Hope you enjoyed this episode. I enjoyed this one. This was a fun one. I hope there's some questions with this. Please post your questions. Come on the app. Talk to me on the app. I hope you have a great week, great day. Do what you're ever doing. Work smarter, not harder. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to The Millennial Dentist. Visit us online at millennialdentist.com.